Welcome back, everyone, to the Talking Points podcast. Today, it's Zhou and it's Matt Amos. Hayden and Aldas have left us. Matt, how are we doing, mate? It's just me and you today.
Oh, mate, I mean, we're just going to get through this. I mean, if you've watched the race, there is so much to get through. So actually, this might be a blessing in disguise that it's just us two going through it. But you're going to have Tomo being the, sitting on the fence opinions. I'm just going to be going down the route of defending Ricciardo, and that's it. But no, it should be a good one.
Look, you've picked a good race to turn up for Ricciardo. To be fair,
eventually,
mate.
Yeah, it only took the end of the season for a decent sort of result for both drivers. But I mean, I've also seen quite a lot of polarizing opinions on the race. In my opinion, I quite like the race. I really love a Singapore race. I would rate it, a good 7 out of 10. But what would you rate it? Because I've seen so many polarizing opinions online, being like, "Oh, it's rubbish, not a lot happened." But I think that's kind of the enjoyment. What do you think, though?
Yeah, because I think because there was an hour delay. I think because of that, and then also the race went to the full time limit. On top of that, it went to the 2 hours. I think the fact that yes, a lot happened, but also it wasn't much in a way of wheel to wheel stuff. There was a lot of breakdowns. There were a lot of safety cars. So there was a lot going on. But there were also big periods where there wasn't. I mean, I'm probably saying just a 5. It wasn't bad, but I didn't think it was exceptionally good. It was a bit weird though, wasn't it, Matt? Because obviously that delay, it felt at the time, at least when they said, because it was absolutely hammering down. Yeah. So they were right for fair enough. You can't go out when it's absolutely chucking.
It was Spa levels bad. Yeah. But what was the weirdest one is that when the drivers, do their parade laps around, they sit on the back of the old-fashioned cars, completely bone dry, and then as soon as the race, it was meant to sort of start, or they're building up to it, just torrential rain, almost as bad as Spa. And then, as you said, it being an hour delay, and then eventually we got to go going. Yeah,
because I mean the climate in that part of the world, I think you do, in terms of flash kind of storms almost, because it was crazy. Yeah. I did find it a bit weird. I know a lot of people weren't happy with pushing the whole thing back an hour, which did seem a bit overkill. I guess at the time it was kind of what if it rains again? But obviously they were confident it wasn't going to rain again because they went through they just moved the whole process back an hour. So in the end it was fine. But also I think we need to quickly, before we get into the meat and bones of the races, quickly reflect on qualifying, because it was I mean the main talking point was Red Bull and Verstappen. What did you make of because obviously Max was understandably annoyed, right? He wants to win the championship as soon as possible. He's not happy unless he's winning races. I think that's the mentality you need to be a successful Formula One driver. But where did you sit on that whole issue?
I think I was the same with everyone else watching the onboard, being like, he's going up. Oh, he's got green sector. Oh, he's going to get it. It's going to get. Why is he going in the pit lane? No, it's. He had the opportunity there. Exactly the same. And I think afterwards if he continued to finish that one, it would have been the second time he would have potentially gone to pole, because the previous lap, which he aborted, was also up on his time. And the interviews he did afterwards, it was very clear that it was the team's mistake. And it's a really rarity to actually see such a clear understanding that it was Red Bull's fault, that they just underfueled the car because they didn't predict enough laps in the session. And it was it just seemed like a miscalculated problem. And obviously for Max, it's just so frustrating, because when you're putting so much on the line there, when it's already in tricking conditions, they're getting to the point at the end of Q3 where everyone was swapping from, intermediates into softs. There's a lot of pressure going on, to knowing that you're up on your time, to then your team telling you, we got a box. I mean, if I was in that situation, I would also just be screaming, me like, what the fuck are you on about? Of course,
It's even better that they wouldn't tell him, because they didn't want to tell him on the radio, because they didn't want it to be public knowledge until they knew for sure. And so I think that's why they wouldn't tell him.
Frustrating, I think what's more frustrating as well, I think Max said himself, I think he was 2.7 up. Because
on his previous best,
because the lap times were massively dropping down. And I think it's so frustrating because the pit entry is only 1.5 corners away from the actual timing beam, because it's literally as soon as you come around the final corner, it's right there. And it's sort of even if he lifted and coasted, maybe he would have still potentially got it. But then obviously, on the in lap, that's where they could have counted for the 4 extra things. But yeah, I think I share with everyone that it was a rare blunder, a very clear blunder from Red Bull in that one.
I'm not being funny. Like, imagine if Ferrari had made that mistake. Imagine that was a Charles Leclerc like on for pole lap and they'd done that. Like they would be getting absolutely ripped a new one. Because look, I think a lot of people were critical of Max's reaction afterwards, but at the end of the day, right, I think that.
I thought it was completely validated. Yeah. I think absolutely fine.
I think it's fine because, look, at the end of the day, right, and I know drivers react emotionally, right, but they're the drivers. They're the ones who are putting themselves in this car. They're the ones with the adrenaline pumping through. You're relying on the team to be that calm, steady, and they've got all of the information. So Max was right to listen to the team. And again, I mean, better start P8 than it is starting from the pit lane. I get that. But, yeah, I think that was I think Red Bull, they've earned enough points in the collective consciousness of F1 fans to kind of get away with that one. If that was a Ferrari, they'd be getting lambasted.
Exactly.
But it did mean that it was a bit more of an exciting build-up in terms of, Max starting P8. And, obviously, Max starting P8 had an absolute shocker off the start and he still kicked in. But we chatted before and... was there an actual issue with Max's car, or was it a setup problem?
I believe he was in the wrong engine mode. Now, also, just bearing in mind, we're recording this just after the race, so if there's more things that have come out since this has gone out, then please do forgive us, because God knows last time I was like saying, oh, Lando Norris had a poor start, and then we didn't have the information at the time, and again, it was also the wrong energy mode, so don't put down your pitchforks. We're all fine here. We're all friends. It's all fine. But yeah, no. So I think I believe he was in the wrong. No, please no. I believe he was in the wrong energy mode. Engine mode. I can't even see myself.
This is Formula E.
Yeah. Well, it did it towards the end because it went to a time race. So, but yeah, I was actually really surprised with the first lap that. For the most part, and we'll come on to your boy a little bit later, for the most part, everyone behaved really well. I was expecting, full-on collisions, like people skidding off and such in the first sort of sector of it. But everyone seemed to actually be behaving really well. I don't know if you've seen it or not, but the onboard from Sebastian Vettel just sort of like going up from the order, it looks like for him on his onboard that it wasn't even wet conditions. It's kind of just like a standard normal race. But the amount of spray going up was insane. And I know for the TV coverage, they normally have to rely on like a quite high position, so at least you can see some of the cars. But yeah, I thought it was actually a pretty decent start for everyone.
Yeah, Seb had an absolute worldie off the start. I remember looking at him, he made like 4 or 5 positions or something up, and then. Alex did spin. He was the only spinner in the first lap, and it wasn't like he didn't touch anyone. I think he just caught a break and
just caught a little lock up
for a Spinala. But he ended up getting away with it because he went rear into the barrier.
Sort of. What was weird though is that like afterwards he didn't really suffer too much actual damage, but the rear wing, it was kind of just a bit wonky just to the side. Like there was a few shots where like it was just face on and you see where the car is kind of symmetrical. It's just off to the side a little bit, but it seemed everything mechanically was still working. DRS was still there and stuff, but it seemed, I think it was turn 7 he went off, which seemed to be, for this race and also previous ones, with W Series with like Jamie Chadwick, that seemed to be the one corner which kind of caught everyone off guard. I believe it was turn 7, but everyone just couldn't get it stopped in time, and either you went off to the runoff or you got into the barrier. But yeah, unfortunately for Albon.
That was the thing with Singapore, is that it wasn't consistently like the wetness wasn't consistent throughout the track. There were certain parts that were way moister than others, and we saw that in qualifying where you had like purple sectors on slicks in some parts, and then you were just nowhere on others. But again, because Alex ended up retiring, right, because he shunted later in the race frontwards. Yes. But I think they actually retired him because he had floor damage, so he might have got floor damage from that first shunt. Or the second one, he crashed twice. Not a good day for my boy. You can't win them all, all right? Is what it is. We take those. And also, obviously, Max had a shocking start, but Checo had a great start. Or was it that... Well, because Checo and Charles' starts were very similar, weren't they? But that second phase, Checo just got loads of momentum and just flew past Charles. And that ended up actually being pretty pivotal because Checo led every lap of this Grand Prix.
Yeah, it was insane. Going into turn 1, he just seemed to have so much control. I mean, coming out of turn 3, everyone gets a little bit rear happy, but I think that's pretty common just to sort of manage it. But yeah, I think he just had a perfect position just to get into the first corner. Everyone's being a bit careful. But the main thing that shocked me from that is, Leclerc was stuck behind Perez, really good. But for the shock for me was that Sainz, although yes, he did keep it third for the majority of the whole, I think pretty much the whole race. he just couldn't seem to keep up with him at all. And
just
I think
slow.
and it was just like I think coming to like lap 24, I think is around about that time. He was about 15 seconds behind and was just nowhere near the pace of Leclerc. But we'll talk about that a little bit later, because the next big thing I think that happened was Latifi and Zhou. With Zhou doing, I think, a good old pass. And like, what's really frustrating is that it got to this point of the race where it's one of the rare few occasions where Alfa Romeo's car actually was working, and this is the one time for both Bottas and Zhou to kind of like, really, this is time to get a good haul of points. And at this point of the race, I think both drivers were just outside of the top 10. I think Bottas maybe was around P10 at this point. But then, yeah, Latifi, celebrating his last ever race at Singapore, just couldn't. Yeah, but he says he didn't see Zhou in the mirrors and just sort of properly pushed him into the wall. And I just felt so sorry for Zhou, because like he did nothing wrong. He was fully alongside him. Just frustrating.
I'm not, because I mean, you'll correct us in the comments if we're wrong. I think it was actually because Latifi was running P17, because Zhou started P15. Yes. And I don't think he had... So, I don't think they were that high. But we saw from... I mean, Bottas had a clean race, still didn't finish in the points. Yeah. So, I don't think the Alpha... But there was definitely potential there, for sure, because he did out-qualify Bottas. But yeah, I mean, Latifi just closes that door. It's one of them that it was just... Again, frustrating for Zhou, because he has had some, like, shocking luck this year. Yeah. It wasn't probably going to be a great race anyway. But at the end of the day, Latifi's just... I mean, bruv, that's like, come on, man. You got to do better than that, mate. And it's like, I don't know, it's just a lack of spatial awareness there. I get there's spray, but Zhou's near you. Like, give the space,
like the run Zhou had out of like turn 1 and 2. Of course, you're going to see him behind. And the first thing you say as a driver after an incident is like, "Oh, I didn't see my mirrors." It's like, mate, no, you don't. That's straight away. You're admitting, even if you're a driver trying to like not put blame on yourself, by saying you didn't even see him, that's kind of already admitting you've done it. And it's just like even that sort of response is bad. One thing though, I want to quickly mention. The Latifi Zhou incident, I don't know if you clocked this or not, but Zhou's family was in the garage, and I believe it's the second time. Yeah. I believe it's the second time Zhou's family have watched him race for live. And remember, the first time that happened was at Silverstone with the massive incident that happened on turn 1.
Oh my god!
And then now the second incident happened.
Oh no!
So there's almost like a Zhou family curse or something going on.
Zhou, tell him to stay home, mate. Tell him to stay home. Because this is not a good...
I feel bad for him now.
That is...
Mom, no, leave me to race.
It did just cut to the just standing... I mean, fair enough. Like, it's just been taken out. It just such a silly little incident. It's such a shame for him. But he got his new contract, so he's fine.
A funny thing as well. After that, one more thing for when Latifi came in, I don't know if you clocked this or not. When Latifi came into box to basically retire the car... I believe they swapped tyres to see if they could actually work it or not, and I think they realised
they put a new front wing as well.
Then I think they realised it had the rear left had too much damage on the suspension, whatever it was. They did the whole X symbol to not go, and then all the crew then just left Latifi in the car. It's just sort of like, hello guys, it's just on its own.
Yes. I do, you can just see them like part, and then there was one or two who were still loitering around, but the vast majority just, and Latifi just sat there with his little Canadian flag on his helmet, just like guys. Like, is that it? Are we done here? But we were done here, unfortunately for Nicholas. Not one to remember for Eva Williams at the end of the day. But then obviously after that incident, the race did kind of settle in a bit. There wasn't too much going on, but there was obviously Verstappen making his way through the field, brilliant. Caught up to Fernando Alonso. And Fernando was doing a stonking job keeping Max behind, considering the pace delta. I think, Fernando and Lando were both putting in like 2-minute 2s, 2-minute 3s, and Checo and Charles at the front were putting like 1:59s in. So they were going way quicker, and Max had way more pace. But Fernando was doing a great job until the GP2 engine came in. And unfortunately, his 350th race ended in retirement, which kind of sums up Fernando's career in a way. I know he's won 2 world titles, but you got to think without, with a bit more rubber the green, it maybe should have been a lot more.
Yeah, and it's it's a really bad day for both. Yeah, not only just Alonso but also Ocon, which we'll talk about a little later. But Yeah, and very shortly after that as well, we also had Yuki then also spin and then go into anti-stall as well, which was really rare because I believe like he just kept it out of the barrier and then had an issue trying to like grab his wheel, and then I just saw on the screen anti-stall, and then you just see, I don't know who it is, but someone had to do a quick evasive movement to get behind to not, clutter into him because it's quite a fast corner. Which then obviously knocked Yuki down, I think, like three or four positions into that as well. I mean, it's this whole section of the race, it went steady for a bit, and then all of a sudden we had a load of madness of just not drivers necessarily making mistakes, excluding Alonso from this, but you saw, like Russell trying to make a move on Bottas, and he just couldn't stop and just went off. And then we had also I think a big issue. So when we had the safety car restart from that. There was just such huge gaps as well, and it just seemed for me like this is one of the few races where we're starting to see quite a lot of actual driver mistakes going on because it's just due to it just being a really pressured race. You've got the heat temperatures going on, it's a night race, so everyone's a bit tired anyway, and a lot of pressures on these guys. And I think this is the one time we've actually seen many drivers kind of crack under pressure. And Max did an amazing job coming through the field. Like some of the moves he did, like the move he did on Gasly was unbelievable. Lovely little dive.
That was lovely. That was aesthetic as fuck.
Fair play to him. Like, like he was, and like him stuck behind Alonso was just like, he wasn't necessarily going for moves. He was just waiting for the opportunity. But then unfortunately, as soon as Alonso sort of had to retire, you just see Max being able to extend and trying to catch up now. Because obviously he was losing some time behind Alonso, but, then I believe that brought out the virtual safety car.
Oh, I mean, there was just
so many. Yeah,
I've lost track. I've lost track, mate. VSC, safety cars, and it took ages because no one wanted to pit off the Inters because it was kind of the slick wasn't the right tire, the Inter wasn't. But again, like what you say about the physicality, and there was all this talk beforehand about Singapore, and we saw in the cool down room post race, like Checo was just chucking bottles of Evian over his head, like no one's business. It's like. I love that because that almost Singapore's for me from that point of view anyway. It feels much more old school because you go back to the F1 in the 70s, 80s, 90s, and all these races were really physical, and you had to be like, no matter how fit you are, it was going to take the take the wind out your sails. And it's like it's one of them that we saw loads of mistakes. We saw not just because of that, because you had a drying track, so you had a dry line and then the wet line, as Lewis saw later in the race when he tried to put the move on Seb. You go offline to make a move and there's no guarantee you're going to keep it stuck. So for me, yes, Singapore did it offer loads of wheel-to-wheel racing? No, but again, the pressure, I mean, the humidity on the engines, I mean, that's probably why both Alpine engines went pop, because they really don't like those kind of humid, high temperatures. And I just think it's such it's a really unique challenge for the drivers. That's what I mean. I think there's a lot of drivers, we'll talk about in the head-to-heads, who kept it clean. And just keeping it clean at a race like Singapore is huge because so many drivers didn't and couldn't in the end of the day. Because again, obviously, like Russell was the first to gamble on the slicks because there was that whole conversation, wasn't there, about when to do it? And I think George's race had already gone by that point,
and I think
so it's like, why not?
And I think I think it was very much a gamble, but I think it was just a too early of a gamble to do it. And I mean, as you said, at that point, his race is kind of like he was at the back of the grid already, not only from the starting from the pit lane, but it seemed like as the race went on, he wasn't making that many moves, and they needed something to try and help him out, because it seemed like overtaking round here was actually kind of hard. I mean that's why going back to your earlier point about the whole physicality of it, it's why I love Singapore, and it's also the reason why I was a big fan of the Malaysia race, because it's also the kind of the same conditions. And a really good example, seeing the drivers completely exhausted. I think it's in Drive to Survive, correct me if I'm wrong, episode 8, where just after the race is finished, you see all the drivers in Parc Ferme just queuing up, waiting to get their ticket after being weighed, and they're all just like just completely drained of energy, completely fucked. But as I said, that's why I really like these races, because it really does push these drivers. We saw all their training regimens of going into saunas and sweating with a load of stuff on to really get prepared for that. And that's what I kind of love about this. And so, as we were sort of saying with this, it's you got so many drivers who I do believe kind of cracked a little bit under the pressure. You know, I believe, you know, Russell went on that move on Bottas. I think, yeah, it was just miscalculated. And we saw some other drivers have that as well. And yeah, Russell going onto the mediums, having that incredible drift coming out of the pit lane.
Oh, that was nice.
Yeah, Tokyo Drift, add that music onto that because that's going to be perfect onto it. Like,
yeah, that was immediate. That's straight away what I thought. I was like, oh, if I had Premier Pro right now, I'd like, whip that up straight away. And Russell Russell had a bit of a shocker. He crashed into Magnussen as well, didn't he? He just turned into him and then ended up getting a puncture.
I think that happened. Yeah, I think he did that twice. I think in the race where basically he felt I think it's coming a little bit of a trend with Russell. We've had this before where he feels like he's got the move done, tries to move back over to the racing line, but then the car is obviously still there. And then like the incident you said with Magnussen, it's like there was so much track space there. It just seemed like a bit of a weird one of why he just didn't have that sort of peripheral sort of thing across.
I'm surprised George didn't get a penalty for that one, actually. Yeah. If I was a steward, I'd have given him a penalty for that because that I think that gave Magnussen damage.
Yeah, he then had to box because he had it was the meatball flag because he had the broken front wing.
Bruv, Magnussen cannot catch a break. How did he get another meatball flag? That's literally that happened at, was it Canada as well?
Yeah,
where he got that. Mate, honestly, that he must have like nightmares about meatballs.
And also, I think potentially Monza as well. I don't know if he got a meatball flag for that, but I know he got damage basically from elsewhere. But then after that, your boy, funny enough, everyone couldn't find any water on track, but then somehow Albon managed to find the only wet part of the track.
Come on, Alex.
It goes off into the barrier.
He's done it. I know. Yeah.
I felt bad for him.
Look, I mean, again, that was a prime example of, you know, you catch a break, you could see it lock up, and then you're just, you know, you're so on the edge. Is it a dip in concentration? Maybe it is, because he was just kind of on his own. And again, with Hamilton, when he had his shunt, where obviously he went straight on, but when he was chasing Sainz, again, like he just kind of snatched. They were both on the Inter still at the time, went straight on. And look, that's the thing with Singapore. If you make these little cock-ups, it punishes you. And that put Alex out of it was already a shocker as it was anyway. So again, we move on from that one. But yeah, I mean, the fact that even Lewis did it, we saw Max later in the race have a massive lock up going for a move as well. I think, you know, all the drivers were guilty of it to some kind of extent, and then obviously Tsunoda, when Yuki eventually put the slicks on, I think he did his quickest first sector on his outlap, like having put the new tyres on. So he was just going for it. Just full Yuki style. And I remember I did my pre-race stream on Thursday on my channel, and I was like, this just has Yuki Tsunoda like shunt written all over it, Singapore. And it's exactly what happened.
Like, and I think you said it. Yeah.
Like Yuki, man, I've been putting this whole like rough diamond thing, and I believe there's pace there. But these mistakes, they're getting to a stage now where it's unacceptable. Yeah, and he needs to, like, you could see him afterwards. I felt for him, man. I did, because he looked gutted. Of course he did. But at the end of the day, it's not good enough. Like we had this silly shunt in Canada. You can forgive this one, right, to an extent, but it's happening a lot, and it's still happening, and there's an issue there. I think it's a good thing he's got his contract already, because he needs to improve it. He needs to stop shunting.
And it seems like it's, and I will say it seems to be a rookie mistake where for us it's clear that the tyre temperature hasn't come up there properly. And like, you know, with Canada, you know, he basically went off. It was just outside the pit lane, wasn't it? Where obviously the tyres wasn't warm enough. And here, you know, it might have gone to a wet patch but whatever it is, it was still on an outlap, so you shouldn't be pushing that hard. And you know, like it's always a shock. It's always a bit of a worry when you see the onboard, and then all of a sudden you just see perfect like quality of the tire tread, and you'll be like, "Oh no, here we go!" And then
it just immediately locked. It just immediately locked.
Oh, man, and obviously that then brought out the safety car, which, you know, then Perez was just getting really angry at, you know, him with the whole hand like waving at him. Like, it's brilliant. I haven't seen that angry Perez for quite a while, so it was good to have that sort of brought back into it.
That was a bit, at the time I was just like Checo, man, like I don't think you can do that. I'm pretty sure you can't like harass harass Bert Mylander. Like, I'm pretty sure you can't do that. I thought that was going to bite him when it was talking about this potential infringement at the end. I thought it was that. I just assumed it would be for that, because I was like, that's a bit off. But obviously, you had Leclerc harassing Perez on the restart. and it looked like. How do you look at that? Because I feel like Charles he had a couple of sniffs, but then he also made a couple of mistakes, and then he fell out of that range, and then Checo was able to check out. See what I did there? Check out. Do you, because I saw a bit of chat on Twitter talking about Leclerc, not being able to get that move done. Like, do you think that if a Hamilton or a Verstappen were in Leclerc's car, do you think they would have made it count, I guess? Do you think Leclerc maybe lost an opportunity to win that race?
We saw with this, like, I think the whole the race restarts with the safety car throughout all of this. It's always been a weird one this season where the gaps seem like, when the safety car is ending, the gaps seem like you should almost be like nose to tail. So as soon as the leader is gunning for it, everyone is pretty much in a slalom. Whereas here we just kept seeing like these massive gaps sort of throughout. You've
been playing too much F1 management.
I haven't played it at all, unfortunately.
when the cars are like, they're like a snake.
Yeah, they're like, so for me, I'm like, if I'm a driver and I know the safety car is going to come into it, I want to be as close to the person in front. And we even saw it earlier where Hamilton on the VSC was right behind Carlos Sainz. And he sort of he brake tested me and whatnot, and they were sort of fighting for position there. And we also saw it with Max Verstappen jumping too early, going past Lando Norris, and then having
that was a bit
then having to slam on the brakes there. And I don't know if he did go ahead or not, and I'm surprised also that wasn't really. I don't know if it was investigated or not, as we said earlier. We only know the information we go off here, but I feel like it was an opportunity kind of missed. But they were fighting for quite a while, and I felt that there was going to be an opportunity for Leclerc once they were race running again to actually potentially get the position from Perez. But Perez wasn't making any mistakes. He did a really, really good job. Fair play to him,
Yeah. As much as I think, maybe Leclerc had a sniff, but I don't think, I think Perez was doing enough. I think he didn't, he had that pressure and he didn't fumble and he kept it going. I thought this was an unreal race from Checo. Yeah. I was so impressed, throughout the race. The way he kind of kept on it was sick. And obviously we'll talk at the very end before we get into the head-to-heads about the potential punishment which kind of hung over things at the end. But quickly as well, little Verstappen Hamilton Vettel battle. That was good vibes towards the end, wasn't it?
And I absolutely loved that. And what I loved about it most is because it just came off, Verstappen having to pit because he locked up the tyres, he ruined it going past Lando. So he's like, right, well, that's ruined it. So he jumped down to what I think it was like P8. I think it was P9, P8, or around that sort of section.
He came out right in between, didn't he? Because Vettel was P. I can't remember.
I think P7 or P8, but I love that. It was brilliant. It was just, I think they had a stat come out. I can't remember what it was. It was like how many combined championships you were seeing, kind of actually sort of fighting. And what I love though is that fair play to Vettel, perfect racecraft in that scenario. He was properly defending and obviously that was helped out, with the race conditions, yada, 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 any other excuses. But also, I just actually thought the whole racing between all three of them was great. Seeing Max go, it wasn't. It was Max who went for the dive, wasn't it? I'm trying to remember now. There's so much stuff happened. I can't remember who went for the dive bomb.
Max went for the dive on, no, it was Hamilton went for the dive on Vettel.
And then missed it.
And then he was on the wet side of the track and then went straight
off again. And then. But even then, though, it was just brilliant. It was annoying. I was a little disheartened that Max did get him in the end because I was like, "Oh, come on, Vettel!" I think it was for P7. I was cheering him on.
It was. Yeah,
because I think it was just the whole race Max had. So much stuff going wrong with his race. Although he did a really impressive stint going through the order. I love that little train they had going through and who's gonna make a little mistake here? Who's got a better exit? I loved it.
Yeah, that was the thing. At the end of the race, you had to rely on the car in front of you making a mistake because there was the clear dry line. So and we saw that with Max on Lando, we saw that with Hamilton on Vettel. If you go offline to try and make the overtake at the end of the race, you're going to lock up. You're going to go straight on. At the start of the race, when there wasn't a dry line, I mean, we had Fernando earlier being like, "Where's the dry line?" I don't know if there is one because I can't see it. But by the end, you had to kind of rely on drivers making mistakes. At the end of that, I think if Hamilton doesn't go for that move, they probably hold off Max and maybe stay as they are. Yeah. But it was a good little battle. We enjoyed it. But Checo took the win in the end, ahead of Charles Leclerc. Carlos
one other
Sainz,
thing that
again, like you say,
two things I want
after a bit of a shock.
two
Go on.
things-
Oh, go on.
I just want to get two things
this
from
knowledge.
you. Well, because there was one other blunder from George Russell getting the puncher with Mick Schumacher from hitting him. So I think I was going down into. Was that going into turn 1? I think it was. I think it was turn 1.
Wait, that was Magnussen.
I think it was Mick Schumacher. I think potentially. Well, Magnussen. Both Hasses had. Both Hasses had some damage. I think. But yeah, so that put out George Russell. I think. But then I wanted to get your opinion on this with the tyre strategy, because I didn't quite understand why, when everyone was then boxing for like mediums and stuff, why teams like, I think it was Ricciardo, Bottas, and another person, they went on to softs. What's your take on it? Because for me, that didn't make much sense really, because the softs have always been hard to get into temperature, and I think it was like with like 30 or 35 minutes to go, it seemed like a kind of a weird one to do. So what do you think about
it? I mean, because the track was so greasy, like my understanding would be you chuck on the softs because they generate temperature quicker than the harder compounds, and then obviously they're more likely to fall off. But if there's still moisture on track, then you can keep the tyres fairly cool without overheating them. So I don't really know. I mean, because you're right. It was Bottas and it was Ricciardo, and then Verstappen ended up putting on softs. After he
ruined his previous tyres,
exactly, because he was on the mediums. So I don't really. Yeah, I mean, in those conditions on that track, I don't really know what the right whether medium or I guess medium's probably the more conservative approach, because I know they were saying that when everyone pitted for mediums, the tyre warm up took longer than they anticipated. So the drivers that stayed, because was it Charles pitted first, didn't he, to try and get an undercut on Perez, but then Perez stayed out on the inters for a lap longer. But then when Perez came out, in combination with Charles having a poor pit stop, he was even further ahead because those mediums took a long time to heat up. So I guess that's the only reason you'd put a soft on, to maybe think.
I think it was clear as day as well that the overcut
maybe.
Here was way more powerful than the undercut. I don't think anyone benefited from the undercut at all. And I think that's one of the reasons, like why McLaren did so well, because, they were waiting for a while to see how it worked out and it played in their favour. And
mate, massively. Because I remember the radio, it was like GP said to Verstappen, pit opposite Norris. And then Norris didn't pit, but Max did. And then Tsunoda shunted. So then it just perfect. Which is, if it'd been the other way around, then tinfoil hats would have had to be. Because that would have been Tsunoda crashing, favouring Verstappen again. But it wasn't the case today. And Checo won ahead of Charles and ahead of I think this, Carlos Sainz, which I think we can all be happy.
Yeah, and I think this is one of his best race wins, I think. Obviously the one with Racing Point, I think is one of the standout ones. Obviously that was his first one, I believe. But I think this one is it's obviously he had Sakir as well. But I think this one here is he didn't put a foot wrong whatsoever. He was on the front row of the grid, got first position within the first corner, and then stayed there the entire race. So happy for him. Where was his dad? We wanted to see his dad reacting. Every time he's won, that his dad's not been there. It's.
Well, if you're watching on YouTube, let us know in the comments. Which was better, this win for Perez or Sakir? Because they were both very, very, very different wins. You had a midfield car coming from the back, ultimately relying on Russell's misfortune, but also making cracking moves through the field. This was holding on to a lead at the toughest track on the calendar, constant pressure, greasy, horrible conditions. They were both incredible wins, but this was I think Checo. There's been a lot of talk. We were talking about this kind of
last week,
last talking points about Checo. His kind of relative performance to Max does seem to have kind of fallen off. But in these conditions, when it is a bit changeable, when it isn't reliable, you really see that driver shine through. Now, who knows how well Max would have done if it had started up there? It's impossible to say for sure, but. The fact that Checo was able to keep Charles at bay, which Max hasn't been able to keep Charles at bay at times this season, incredible. Unfortunately, it kind of, when he did cross the start-finish line to win the race, there was this kind of asterisk Now, obviously, it's been confirmed he has won the race. He did get a 5-second penalty and a reprimand, but the gap between him and Charles was 7.1 seconds in the end, so he keeps hold of P1. What do you think, Matt?
Yeah, I think unfortunately, because Formula One is so beautifully captured by so many cameras, I think we all were able to look at the replays, and even when they're doing the analysis and being like, yeah, unfortunately, you kind of been caught kind of red-handed, where you weren't within 10 car lengths of the safety car line, whereas in other case you were able to cut. I think because he was being investigated, I believe twice. Once he was okay to get passed away from, but the other occasion, he was it's clear as day he wasn't anywhere as near. But I think that was quite good of Red Bull to. I mean, actually, no. Let me rephrase that. I think it's so annoying the FIA are deciding this stuff post-race. Like, what are you more trying to find out that you need to speak to the driver after the race to get your more inclusion of? Because whatever the driver says, of course they're going to try and go to their defense with this. But it's just so frustrating as a viewer seeing like something which could affect the winner of the race being decided afterwards, and it's just so frustrating. And like, you have it all the time in Formula E, and that's why the racing element for it is it dies on its ass there. And with this, it's a bit like, even the commentator is a bit like, why are you doing it up? What more information are you going to get from Perez? Of course he's going to say afterwards, being like, oh mate, the conditions were too wet, I didn't want to if I brake I might have gone into Burt Marlander. It's like, you're not going to gain anything extra from it. And it was just frustrating. But nevertheless, I thought it was smart from Red Bull being like, right, fucking floor it now. We've got to make this gap just in case. And if we don't get a penalty, then good on you. You then got a 7.1 second lead over Leclerc. But I was also surprised, that Leclerc wasn't able to keep up with that. Obviously they knew they were going to push for it, but at the same time there were moments throughout the race where Leclerc, he was right behind him and potentially could have got the win for it.
That's what I mean. I think there were some scruffy laps from Leclerc towards the end, which maybe contributed to him not being able to keep that gap a bit lower. But maybe also, Checo, I think, arguably was just the quicker driver on the day, to be honest. Like that's just the way I feel about it. But actually, I was looking on, because Chris Medland tweeted earlier on saying actually there was 3 times where Checo dropped too far back. So first time was lap 10 on the inters, and he got reprimand. Okay. Then the second time was lap 36 on the slicks, where he was warned, and then the third time was on lap 36 again, and then he got a 5-second penalty. Makes now, sense. Obviously, the debate around this is that, if that gap had been less than 5 seconds, would Checo have still got a 5-second penalty, therefore taking the race win away from him? And that's, I guess, part of the reason why there's a lot of... And again, I think the question is rightly so. Should the fact that Perez pulled a gap to more than 5 seconds determine whether or not he's given a 5-second penalty from a completely unrelated incident? Obviously, no. Yeah. But also, like, taking someone's win away after the fact, you kind of paint yourself into a position that no one's going to be happy with that, because Leclerc fans aren't going to be happy because you robbed him of the opportunity to celebrate a victory, and Perez fans aren't going to be happy that you've let go through all that and then you're taking the win off of him. Because at the end of the day, like, there's nothing in that incident, exactly what you said, there's nothing in that incident that needs to be like, oh, why we should speak to the driver. No, like, you don't see that in other sports. Nothing. Like, why we speak to the fucking drivers? Like, of course they're going to be like, oh, I didn't do anything wrong. Like, no, like, if he broke the rule, then he broke the rule. Yeah, like, that's simple. And I don't understand, like, from Checo's point of view, I just think that's like, it's silly from him for this to even potentially be a thing. Yeah. Because he was fucking miles behind the safety car. Like we can see it. If there's any driver they want to speak to about, the relative gap and what the conditions are there, you've got 2 drivers who can do that already, who are driving the safety car. Like, literally, you've got a co-passenger there who's just controlling the lights. I'm oversimplifying it. No offense to Burt Myler and his co-driver there. But if they're wanting to know real time what the conditions are like, because, there's a bit of a gap here, we're trying to figure out maybe this might be the reason why. If they're like, actually, we can get around here absolutely fine, then they go on kind of bit more of like, this actually, this is all more validated. But again, it's like, we've seen this before, where, like, Carlos Sainz's first podium, I think, was with McLaren. It was a bit of a sour taste because, like, he got the podium after all the celebrations had done. And yes, the team went up to the podium when all the lights had already turned out to celebrate it. But you want to watch it
and celebrates it with the crowd there, and it kind of just leaves a sour taste. And so, yeah, if say for example Perez was given, a 10-second penalty, or or the earlier reprimand was actually converted to 2 separate 5-second penalties, for him to cross the finishing line and then only like 20 minutes after the podium find out he's actually lost it, it looks so bad for the sport. And it's like, and I know it's technically not Formula One's fault because it's all governed by the FIA, which is separate to Formula One, but they need to get this sorted out. I mean, like, what more are you needing to get from it? But either way,
it's like this job, right? This privilege that we have to talk about F1, right, and do podcasts and do our own channels. It's just every week I'm talking about the fucking FIA, bruv. It's just like, I'm so bored of it, man. But like, in this instance, I would have rather they'd have been like, right, Checo, you got a 5-second penalty,
slam dunk,
and then we know, like, okay, Checo's got to keep that gap above 5 seconds. Then we're watching the clock, and then once he's crossed that finish line and it's 7.1, we know, hey, Checo's won, well done. Like, do that. You know what I mean? There was just no need. Like, it's like 30. The transgression happened on lap 36. 36. And how many laps did we have in the end? We had like, what, 50? Hang on, let me have a look. What? Actually, I'll have a look while you start on the head-to-heads. Because I want to find out exactly how many laps this was.
Right, well, welcome to the head-to-heads, everybody. If you've never been or watching or heard this podcast before, this is where we go through all the drivers and basically we pick our driver of the day per team. And we kind of look a little bit over qualifying, but it's mainly sort of like what happened during the race. So obviously, let's start out then with Red Bull between Sergio Perez and Max Verstappen. I think for me, clear as day, it's got to go to Sergio Perez. I mean, like, Max did a good job coming up through the field, but we did see some mistakes, clear as day. Perez didn't do anything wrong. And ultimately also, if you really wanted to go down to it, Perez technically did out-qualify Verstappen. I mean, like, obviously there's loads of people in the comments now going to be like, yeah, but what about if this, or if that, or but this? And it's like, well, no, that didn't happen. This is what happened. And I'm ultimately, so my pick is going to be Perez.
I mean, Verstappen was for sure the quicker driver in qualifying, but in the race, Checo didn't put foot wrong. Max, he had a more difficult job, which wasn't necessarily his fault. But I think you've got to give this to Checo. And it was 59 laps, the race. So the third transgression happened on lap 36. So you're telling me 23 laps is not enough time? Yeah. Are you dumb? No. Anyway, I think Perez slam dunk, easy, which, hasn't happened often this season, but I'm chuffed for him because, there was a lot of talk. And I think fair, I think he has been, worryingly far
starting
behind
to drop
Max
off a little bit,
a
little bit like what we saw last year. But like, hopefully now this is like the momentum he needed to, like, they always say it's like the confidence the driver now needs. They've got the win off their back, and like it's all okay, cool. Now hopefully it's in the right trajectory.
What pundit are you?
I have no idea whatsoever.
Neither do I. Let us know in the comments below who that reminds you of.
Make up a pundit name for me, and then that'll be the new voice.
Yeah. I think Ferrari is even easier, really. Yeah. Zhou out-qualified Carlos, not by much. Carlos was very close in qualifying, but I feel like this, I don't know, maybe I'm just copium because I've got a lot of love for Carlos Sainz. You feel like he was just consistently much slower, and I feel like maybe there's a setup thing going on because, whenever a driver has a worse race than their teammate, it's not 100% because of a difference in ability or talent on the day. There are other factors. And I don't know. I feel like the fact that Carlos's tyres just kept falling off like immediately. Maybe there was a setup issue. Or maybe he was just slower than Zhou. Day. But Zhou, easy. And I
think for me as well, it's got to go to Leclerc. And like, you could always make up the excuse. I always make the excuse for Ricciardo being like, oh, different tyre strategies. That's the reason why he's slower. But with this scenario, it wasn't. It was pretty much kind of the same. If anything, Leclerc went on to the worse tyre first, and he's still got. I mean, even towards the end, but excluding all the safety cars before that happened, Carlos wasn't as we said earlier in the podcast, he wasn't keeping with Leclerc. And come towards the end of the race, after all the virtual safety cars, after all the safety normal cars we've had, he was still like 10 seconds off the pace. And it's just like, it's a bit worrying for me. I do want to see him get a bit better now because, it's like they're needing to try and secure a bit more championship points into it. But it just needs to get a bit better.
I think in normal dry conditions, Carlos is a couple 2-3 tenths off of Zhou. I think in normal dry conditions, the thing is, Carlos usually excels in these kind of conditions, so that's what makes me think there's probably more to it. But who knows? I don't have the numbers at the end of the day. Mercedes, oh my God, George.
For the whole team, I think, actually.
George had a shocker. Yeah. I mean, Lewis also made a couple of big mistakes as well. I think, but George had an absolute shocker.
Yeah, I think it's, and also I do want to mention our lovely co-presenter, Aldas, put out the brilliant tweet of being like, you're about to see a George Russell masterclass, P5 or maybe even the podium. What the biggest jinx in the world. You gotta love it when you see it. But I think, mate, Mercedes is in total just a big L, and I don't want to blame it on the team. I think both George and Hamilton, like, both did their own mistakes. They both went for moves and they locked up and went off into the runoff multiple times. George probably more so because he actually gave other people damage. At least Hamilton didn't. I don't believe he did anyway. I don't think so. But I mean,
don't think so.
I mean, Russell finishing P14 primarily got there purely because everyone else retired. I mean, that's how many retired. I think that's.
I mean, he was last.
Yeah, he was last. And I think Hamilton came, I think P9 in the end. Which when you're originally starting P3, I want to say he started P3.
Yeah.
I mean, again, it's a bit of a no. So I think this one I've got to go to Hamilton for that, because I think he did the less mistakes and qualified better. But I mean, it's a weekend to forget for them. I mean, it wasn't good.
Yeah, he had a less bad day. Yeah, I think Mercedes, George was having issues with his car in qualifying. Lewis wasn't happy with the decisions to go on certain scrubbed tyre, or he wanted scrubbed inters, but they were like, we don't have scrubbed inters.
Yeah.
So I think maybe the team can take a little bit of the responsibility there, but also, I mean, it was tough conditions. I don't really begrudge, Lewis tried the move on Seb and it didn't pay off. I don't begrudge that too much. I think when he shunted on his own, chasing Carlos down, that's a bit more of an L on his part. But I mean, like you say, not a great weekend for either one to forget. Now here we are. Should we go to papaya time, Matt? I can see that you got that orange glow on the side of you. Lando Norris and Daniel Ricciardo head to head. Matt Amos, who is taking the dub?
I don't want to say, because people are going to get angry at me.
Go on, do it. Just do it.
It's got to be Ricciardo, isn't it? It's got to be Ricciardo.
Come on, right? Everyone listening, right? Let's get our pen and paper out and write why we disagree.
Yeah,
with
here we go. No.
Sell us.
I think it's been a really good weekend for McLaren. I fully admit Ricciardo had a complete shocker in qualifying, to the point where I was just for a good 5 minutes, I turned off qualifying after he missed out on Q1. Lucky enough,
I can't say it.
I just got the remote. I was a bit like, for fuck's sake. It's just how am I going to defend this sort of thing? The only saving grace, I was like, well, at least Ocon...
I'll find a way.
The only saving grace I had was I was like, well, at least Ocon is also there, so I can sort of blame it's not just everyone. So, but
To be fair, in qualifying, in Q1, Lando was actually he was only 14th, I think. So Lando was pretty close to being knocked out. He ended up putting it around, but Lando was pretty close to getting knocked out in Q1 as well.
Yeah, and also, I can always make the excuses it's ever-changing conditions, and people would be like, well, maybe he should have qualified quicker first, and it's like, well, he did. It's just the last lap that really mattered, yada, yada, yada. But the reason I'm giving it to Ricciardo is purely because, I think Lando had an amazing race. He started P6, finished P4, which, I think is primarily obviously due to, I think Hamilton and Alonso, who I believe were in front of him at the time, were going out. But I think for Lando, still going around the circuit, there is so much mental and physical strain you're having to do. So to keep that car in that position there, I think it wasn't going to go any higher than I was expecting, P6. So to get P4 is amazing for Norris on that. And I think he had pretty much a bit of a lonely race, to be honest, because once, Alonso had kind of gone out, it was a bit like, right, I'm just doing my own race here. He didn't have much of a tow towards the end. He was then I think he was just on the back of Sainz for a little while and then sort of dropped off. Whereas Ricciardo, he had an absolutely horrific qualifying. There is no real excuses for that. And then, there is a lot to play about in terms of strategy. He did also make up 3 spots on the start. And
yeah, he had a good start.
As you said earlier, it's about keeping it clean. And also, there were drivers in front of Ricciardo who did gamble on going on the tyres onto mediums first, and that was the wrong choice. And he was always talking with his team, like the other drivers should do as well, being like, what's your thoughts on this? Because, there was one point, I think, where Sainz was going to say, he did a radio message saying, I think it's going to be slick soon. And then it cut to someone else being like, yeah, not a chance, mate. It's still too...
No, everyone else was like, waiting.
And I think that's where, the team are relying off, the driver's main input. So, when they're sort of talking to Gasly or Tsunoda, whomever it might be, to be like, right, come into the pits. Whereas, both McLaren drivers were like, no, we're going to stay out. So, yes, loads of people could argue and say, he was kind of gifted that because of the safety cars and whatnot. It's like, no, but he also chose not to pit, and he capitalised off it. That is the team sport, and that's how it works out. Because otherwise, that same excuse you could give to the drivers between Ricciardo and Norris between that time, because they all chose to do different strategies. And the team, the reason I'm rambling about this, because obviously it's the only driver I actually focus on. And obviously we were talking about the soft tyre stuff, which I was really annoyed about, because I was like, why are they putting Ricciardo onto soft? The reason for that was because they wanted him to defend after the safety car restarts, and then can manage the soft tyres later on, which is the reason, obviously, why you then see 20 seconds gap towards the end of the race. I mean, there's even a bit with
32 seconds gap.
And there's a great clip online of both Lando and Ricciardo. I think it was with the F1 post-show, where they're talking about it, where Lando was like, I felt so sorry for you, because as soon as you had the soft on, I was like, he's right behind me, and went, no, he's not. Good luck with the tyres, sort of thing, because he knew soft tyres was just not going to work. But it worked great for them. So I think for Ricciardo to go from pretty much the back of the grid to P5, I mean, kept it clean, didn't do any mistakes. That's the reason why. But also hats off to Norris. But obviously you're going to go with Norris.
Look, I mean, I think they both had very, very, very similar races. Obviously they were on different tyres, so it's hard to tell exactly what the pace difference was. But obviously, Lando did a better job in qualifying.
Which is fair. Absolutely valid. Absolutely valid.
So I think Lando edges it for me, but there's not much in it. I think it was a really good race from Daniel. And I think these conditions, kind of like with Perez, how I think Perez gave a really good account of himself in these kind of changeable conditions relative to a teammate who's kind of been consistently on top of him this year. I think you could say the same for Daniel. I think he was much closer to Lando this weekend, and did a fantastic job. Well done. All positive energy for McLaren.
The only thing he needs to work on, he's slowly becoming Stroll, where he has really poor qualifying. But in the race, he seems to be able to maintain positioning, if not go up a few spots. If he qualifies in the right position, I feel like he can maintain it well. A little bit like what he did at the beginning of the season. And in here, it was a good enough spot. But he just needs to fix that qualifying. But anyway, let's go on to the next team, because I've been rambling on for way too long. I'm so sorry.
You have. How dare you? Right, Alpine. Oh, God. Great weekend for McLaren. GP2 engine weekend for Alpine. Both cars retiring, both with engine issues as well. It was looking, it wasn't looking great for Ocon, because he had a shot in quality as well. But Alonso was starting P5, just behind Norris, wasn't he? Yeah.
Oh, no, just ahead of Norris, I think, yeah. Was it?
Yeah. And, look, I mean, what can you say? Alpine have been taking many L's over this last couple of months, and from a constructor's point of view, this has now put them behind McLaren as well. It's a bad day in Enstone.
Yeah, I think for this one, my pick's got to go to Alonso. Just better qualifying. I mean, it's sort of the same. It's kind of almost the same story. One driver's qualified really well, one driver's done really poorly. But the only issue here is, and also the issues of them during the race, it wasn't their fault whatsoever. You can see on the onboards, the engine just completely cuts out. I mean, it's more dramatic, I think, for Ocon's one, where you see the engine cut out on the onboard, and then you see the reverse on the TV camera. You just see a plume of smoke.
Sounds horrible.
Yeah, and obviously with the humidity there, it just adds on the amount of smoke you're sort of seeing coming off from it. But a day to forget for them, and it's a shame. But my pick's got Alonso. I'm assuming Alonso for you as well.
Yeah. Alonso, I mean, he did a great job holding off Verstappen as long as he did as well. He kept him behind until the car broke. Yeah. So, I thought that was brilliant from Fernando. So, we didn't really see much from Ocon, so I can't really give him too much credit. So, there you go for Alpine. Next, let's talk about AlphaTauri. Pierre Gasly, Yuki Tsunoda. I mean, Obviously, Pierre got a point, which, I mean, you know, when you get 1 point from all that effort, I mean, it's like, oh, whoop-de-doo. But he didn't shunt it into a wall like Tsunoda did. So this is an easy Pierre Gasly. And Pierre Gasly out-qualified Yuki, although both cars in Q3 was pretty impressive. But, shocker from Yuki. You can't be crashing.
Yeah, and I think that's pretty much, it's kind of said and done, really. It's, again, as we were saying earlier, rookie mistake. Gasly doing a good job. I don't think we saw much of him during the broadcast. Which
Not
is
really.
a bit of a shame, but yeah, I think got to go to Gasly for this, and it's fascinating. We still haven't heard much yet about driver lineup with that team, because obviously they've now secured. Obviously they've got Yuki on, but they haven't obviously done any mention with Gasly just yet. It seems from like the Sky broadcast that Ted Kravitz is very adamant that Nick de Vries has got that seat. Replacing Gasly, and obviously Gasly going to Alpine to replace Alonso. But it's just surprising we still haven't had any proper confirmation on that sort of stuff yet. And we're getting towards the end of the season, so now I'm worried that it's just going to be. It's not going to. It's probably going to be like the last race when we actually do find out about it.
Well, I think Canal Plus, who are the French broadcaster, and Ziggo have both said that it's going to be De Vries, AlphaTauri, Gasly, Alpine, and it will be announced around Suzuka. So, look, I mean, I think
you heard it here first. Talking Point exclusive. Pierre Gasly has signed to Alpine, and Nick de Vries has signed to the other one.
The other one.
Keeping it,
brilliant.
Yeah.
The absolute disrespect.
No. I'm keeping it anonymous, so then it can be any team. Exclusive here.
Clever, very clever.
Timestamp it 2nd of October.
Yeah, we'll see. I think it's the right move. I think it's inevitable. Yes. So Pierre Gasly, easy win for that one. Alfa Romeo, I mean, Zhou qualified Valtteri.
But then he didn't. But during the race, I think Bottas got ahead, I believe.
But Bottas didn't really do anything wrong.
No.
I just think that car's not very quick. I'm going to give it to Valtteri. I'm going to give it to
Valtteri, but I personally think that both of them weren't driving to the caliber they should have been doing, because I think the Alfa Romeo, we've said when it works really well, and like, yes, it's tricky conditions, but I'm a firm believer that car had more power in it, and like, to be battling just outside of the points, they should be pretty more comfortable inside it. So it was a bit of a shocker, I think. And I think Zhou lost a few spots at the beginning of the race, I believe. I think he had a bit of a poor start, but obviously then got taken out by Latifi.
Well, if you scrap him with Latifi, it's not gone well,
exactly
is it?
That. Yeah,
let's be honest.
Yeah, exactly that.
that kind of says everything. I think maybe they just haven't kept the upgrades. I'm not too sure. It feels like maybe that's part of the problem. Shame, but hopefully.
That was going to be my other excuse for Daniel Ricciardo. Lando Norris had new upgrades on his car and he didn't. That was my other excuse. I forgot about that. Got to throw that in. Boosh.
That is true.
Anyway, on to the next team.
How much of a difference that made, who knows? But all right,
23 seconds.
Aston Martin. Let's talk about Aston Martin.
Well, fair play.
Lance Stroll and Sebastian Vettel, P6.
I think it's
Stroll's both. I think it's
Stroll's best position scored this season. I think P6 for Stroll. I think probably, yeah, because he got a lot of fringe points appearances, but P12 ahead of Seb in qualifying as well.
Look, I mean, Seb did a good job. We saw that little battle with him, Hamilton and Verstappen, kind of held his own, even though Verstappen got past at the end, which is fair enough. But I think got to give it to Lance Stroll. Hayden's not here, but
he's cheering on.
I think you got him.
It's got to go to Stroll. Fair play to him, and his qualifying. I know I mentioned this earlier. His qualifying is starting to get a bit better, and just during the race. I mean, again, we didn't see too much of him. I think it was more where you had the weird mid-packer where everyone was sort of boxing for mediums or inters. It was around that time we kind of saw a bit of him on the screen. But again, Stroll, from my knowledge, he didn't do anything wrong in the race. He out-qualified his teammate, and fair play to him. So good on you, Stroll. Fair play.
Yeah, neither driver did anything wrong, but Lance started ahead, finished ahead.
There you go. Job done.
Easy dub in the end. Well done, Lance. Right. Haas, K-Mag and Mick. Mick was potentially on for something decent if it wasn't for the safety car. I think I'm actually going to give this one to Mick.
Yeah, I agree, and I think like both. I think obviously we're a bit confused. We can't remember if I believe it's Mick he got contact with George Russell, who I think he then had to. I remember him slowly coming into the pits, so I think he might have also had a puncture as well. But I mean, like,
well, Haas think Mick was on for like a P6, P7 if it wasn't for the safety car.
Yeah, and I think also like I think both drivers also suffered damage. But I got to give it to Mick as well. Although, Magnussen did out-qualify him, I think Mick is starting to show now, like if he's really wanting to keep that seat there, he's got to show to Gunther, please keep me here. So I can't remember. So that's why he was like battling so hard with George. I think there was even a message of George Russell being like, why is he fighting me so hard? And it's like, well, of course he's going to be, because it's a race, but also he's just like, I want to show I can do something. Like
George's version of they raced me so hard is literally
crikey, isn't it? Did he say or blimey?
Oh, of course he said crikey. Of course George Russell said crikey. Obviously, that's just such a George Russell thing to say. But yeah, I mean, not a great one for either in the end. I think they were both caught up in their fair share of things outside of their control. Yeah. But and not one to remember, although not as bad as Williams' weekend. Now, look, I've got to give it to Albon because Latifi is L of the weekend because he did take out Zhou.
Yes.
And he still qualified last against someone who was, in A&E like a week and a half ago.
This is the thing. It wasn't just A&E. This is how surreal it was. 2 weeks ago, after the surgery, they couldn't resuscitate him. They had to get a machine to save Alex Albon's life. That's how serious this whole was. They had to get a proper ventilator on because it wasn't working after that. And then to go from that to then go into mad training. And also, appendicitis, I looked into this, takes about 4 weeks to fully heal, and they had 2 weeks of a gap. That's why, obviously, Nick de Vries was kind of just there. He was also training as well, just in case he had to last call-up. He had to do all this physical work to get his body prepped in that, and he still out-qualified Latifi. Just
by half
a second. But still, though, just like, oh my God, mate, fair play to him. And it's just like, it's mad. But unfortunately, Albon did make the mistakes, which then ultimately it was his own demise, unfortunately. But,
they both had terrible races.
It's a hard one, but at the end of the day, he still out-qualified him. So,
but when you take out another car and you get out qualified, it has to be Latifi.
Yeah. At least with Albon, when he went into the barrier, he didn't hit the Tech Pro, so didn't have to he was being respectful of the race. Get the car out of there as soon as we can. So there you go.
Exactly. What a lovely, respectful man he is. And that's it, Matt. We're done.
Lovely.
We are finished. Did you enjoy that one?
Indeed. Oh, quick question. What was your favourite lid from this race? Because we had quite a few special edition Singapore ones. We had
Seb's.
I think mine is Seb's as well. So obviously we had Zhou, we had Seb, we had Ricciardo with the sprinkle one, we had Lando with the Halo helmet, we had Leclerc with the gold one. But I think Seb's, and I don't know if it's the same reason for me, it's because of the black. It's
not Vanta black, but it's like
it's
proper.
It's the absorbance of light black. So then if you were to shine like a spotlight onto it, you wouldn't see any. It looks a little bit. It looked a bit like I can't remember what the fabric kind of called. It's a little bit like black felt. It kind of looked like on the outside of it. It looks so nice. But
that you're right. If it was glossy black, it wouldn't have been anywhere near as good. To be fair, Lando's was very cool. Good. And your video. Go watch Matt's video on Lando's new Halo helmet. It's good. Charles Leclerc's, I'm not sure what the meaning was behind it.
No, I didn't quite get it either.
Just said love or something. Right, and maybe it's got some nice meaning. I'm not sure. But aesthetically, awful. Oh my God. Awful, man. Shocking. But maybe it's got some nice meaning. Okay, so I don't want to be mean. But aesthetically.
Also, George Russell's one has gone to blue, which I kind of like. Just keep that as is. Like the color theming for it just looks really nice. Well because it originally was going to be black and red, and it was going to be full red, but he kind of said, "Oh, out of respect for Michael Schumacher." I don't believe that. I think he just went a different direction. But weird. I think it wasn't quite right. But the blue with this, I think it works really well. So I think I hope he keeps that color palette because it works. It works really nice in conjunction with the car.
Agree. Although I do find one the Patronus. The Patronus color is like a turquoise,
off green, off bluish,
But the problem is, it's that kind of colour that when it's printed on different surfaces, it sometimes looks more blue, sometimes looks more green, and it really bugs
me. Especially
really
under different lights as well, because like that's my one pet peeve is with the pit lane garages, because you got the fluorescence coming down, but then the garages, they're like tungsten warm. It's just like a little bit like this setup I've got here, where sort of like the background is blue, but then the white balance is like sort of set like this. So it was always a bug of mine. But let us know also down in the comments which is your favourite helmet from this weekend.
Yes, let us know, and 5-star, and do all that good stuff as well, because we keep forgetting to tell you lot to do that. But you better do it. Right? 5-star.
If you've listened this far, if you've listened over an hour,
come on,
it's the least you can do. Give us a follow on Spotify or on Apple Podcasts. It really generally does help out. But if you've listened this far, then you're doing good.
Yeah, come on, like surely. But yeah, we're done, mate. And Suzuka next weekend. You looking forward to it?
Yes, I'm so excited for that. We haven't been there for a while.
What was that? Hell
yeah, absolutely. I mean, we haven't. It's like Singapore. We haven't been there for a little while. And it'll be
early start.
Yes, very early start. What time is it going to be for us? It's going to be 6 a.m.
6 a.m. Yeah.
So yeah, watch out for Tomo being extremely tired on the last lap for that one.
Yeah, that's gonna be a 4 a.m. wake up. I reckon that one. Might just not go to bed, but yeah, that's gonna be vibes. I'm looking forward to that. Though. Those races where you have to get up really early, because they're not all the time, they feel really special. So I'm
and also it's the least we can do, because there's so many Formula One fans in like Australia or America. You have to wake up at stupid times. It's the least we can do.
I'm sure plenty of you are watching, and you're like, "Why are you moaning about what? We're not."
Here's a little violin.
I'm here for it.
Oh, so sad. Oh, yes. Wow. We'll wake up for it.
But yes, thank you everyone for listening. Thank you everyone for watching. We'll see you next week for the post-race podcast from the Japanese Grand Prix. That was Singapore done. My name's Tomo, his name's Matt. We are out. Cheerio, adios, bye-bye. We are done.